Alright guys, so I wanted to record a quick demo here of a little bit of an automation thing I've got going. This essentially what we're doing here is we're automating the real-time tuning settings in Waves Auto Tune, or Waves Real-Time Tune. It's being hosted in the LV1 live mixing software, but this could probably also work in, if you're mixing in a DAW or anything like that. Same sort of principle would work as well. But we're controlling the tuning settings in LV1 with ProPresenter. So one of the problems you can sometimes run into with using auto-tune in the live environment is if you use the chromatic mode, which essentially is tuning your vocalist to the closest note in the chromatic scale. One of the issues you can have is that if your vocalist isn't close enough to the actual note they're looking for, it'll tune them in the opposite direction. So of course, that sounds terrible. We don't want to do that. So the alternative is to lock it into the actual key of the song. So you'll see we're in the key of D major right now. So that's a great way of doing it. But what can sometimes happen is you'll need your sound guy to be switching the cues for every song. And sometimes, you forget, you miss a cue, and then your vocals are way off. So what I'm doing here is I've got ProPresenter, I've got some macros in ProPresenter, and when you hit the first slide of a song, it locks it in to the key you want. So right now I am in the key of D major. Let's head over to our second song. Hit that first button. Now I'm in the key of C major. So it takes all the worry out of it. Make sure as long as you have your macro set up correctly, everything goes smoothly, and it's one less thing for you to worry about in the middle of a worship service. And that's the goal with most of our automation, is just to simplify things. All right. So to explain the automation process, I'm going to actually work backwards. So in order to work backwards, we're going to start at LV1 or whatever DAW that you're using to mix your live stream or whatever for your processing. I'm using LV1. I think this process would be pretty similar for using, Super Rack, Performer, or any of these other things. But what we're doing is we need to control the different keys here in the Auto-Tune plugins. And you're going to see I've got 5 different instances of this. So what I've done, under Show, I've got a different scene for every single key of the Auto-Tune, including the chromatic mode, just for some songs where there might be some modulated notes or something like that. And then I've also got a scene for turning off the tuning altogether. In each of these scenes, we've only got control over plugin 8, because this is where the Auto-Tune plugin is located, and only for these 5 channels. Now, for most of you, these 5 channels are actually going to be located here under your channel, probably wherever your vocals are in your routing. We're using under monitor channels just because we're doing our routing a little bit differently. We wanted to have the ability to essentially run our processed vocals through some of the musicians, some of their in-ear mixes, but without the auto-tune. So we basically route our main vocals. I'll show you here. We route our main vocals here. We got 5 or 4 vocals. We route them through the general input. Then we can do our full processing here, and then the outputs of those feed some dedicated tuning channels. You'll see that the volumes are at 0, or they're supposed to be at 0, because we're not really affecting volume here. We're just adding that final tuning to the process. So you'll see we have plugin 8 is tuning. So each of these scenes, if I go and recall scene 2, key of A, now we have control over, all of our auto-tune plugins are in the key of A. Yep, key of A. And so you set up your scenes. Now we need a way of essentially triggering these scenes remotely. One way that you can do it pretty easy is you can set up your, where is that? Here you go. You can set up your user assignable keys. So right now I've got some of these auto-tune kind of recall scenes assigned to our user buttons here, which then will show up in your mixer. So you could just tap these buttons, and you'll see up here with our indicator of our scene that our auto-tune settings are changing. So that's one way of doing it. That's what we were doing, but we just wanted things a little bit more automated. And I also wanted to be able to use a Stream Deck controller to remotely trigger these. So the easiest way that I've found with the LV1 software is just to use MIDI to do it. So under scenes, you're going to see that we have MIDI enabled, and this is absolutely crucial. You need to have this enabled for this to work. And this also doesn't default to being on. Even if you save your session like this, it will turn off when you reboot. So make sure you remind your volunteers, give them a note, just kind of reminding them, make sure this is turned on. All right, so to do this, we're going to first head over to Setup. And down here under MIDI, we're going to, actually this might not be here for you. So if it's not here, you're going to have to add a MIDI module here and then click the Setup page. Now here in MIDI settings, you're going to have to select your input port. So this is basically which MIDI device we want to listen to commands from. And to get this to work from a different computer, you're going to have to basically create a virtual MIDI device here. So you're going to see it's called LV1 Control. This is what I've labeled it in a different application. And you're also going to have follow program change enabled here. So the program that I'm using here to create a virtual MIDI device on this computer is called Loop MIDI. So it's super simple. You can throw whatever name you want in and create a new network. I don't know what the limit to how many you can do is, but I mean, I only need one for this setup. Now Mac has a built-in version of this called the IAC MIDI driver. So if you're on Mac, you probably won't need to use this. However, I do really like this program because you can set it to boot automatically when the computer turns on. It's automatically going to create this network. So you basically set it up, enable it for startup, automatic startup, and then it's just going to work every time. So I've been a big fan of it. And the only other piece that you're going to need here is something called Midi Relay. So Midi Relay is really wonderful, and what it allows you to do is you can go onto a Stream Deck Companion sort of instance on a different computer, and if you download this host application on whatever computer you want to control, this will let you basically send MIDI messages to that computer from any device that is on your network through the Companion software. So I'll show you how this works in a second, but you're going to need to download Midi Relay, and there's a link somewhere here for that. But it's super simple. You just install it. It'll automatically start when your computer turns on, and that's all you're going to have to do with this software. Just have it installed and running. All right, so now I'm on our computer that is running. It's basically hosting our Stream Deck network on our computer. So it runs Bitfocus Companion, and this is where we're controlling our video switcher and Spotify and doing some other sort of automation with. Super powerful program. It's also free, so it's wonderful. In here, you're going to see under Connections, we have Midi Relay. And in Midi Relay here, what you have to do is you have to put in the IP address of your LV1 host computer. So this is the computer running LV1, the IP4 right there. Make sure the listening port lines up with the settings on the other computer, and that's basically it. You hit save, and you'll see it's connected. So it's connected to the listener application on LV1 on the host computer. Then what you want to do, get yourself a blank page on Companion, and you'll see I've got different buttons for every key of whatever the worship music's going to be in. So you'll see here, each of these buttons have an action for Midi Relay, send program change. And you pick the port. So these are all the different MIDI devices on the host computer, and I just pick LV1 because that's the one I created. And if you name it something else, it'll pop up here with that correct name. You click that, and then the trick is your value right here. So your value to trigger the first scene in LV1, your value has to be 0. To trigger the second scene, your value has to be 1. To trigger the third scene, your value has to be 2. And so far and so forth up to our last one is value 13. So we are, because 0 was the first, we're actually triggering 14 different scenes, the first 14 scenes in LV1. And every time you hit this button, we could do that from here, from a browser if we wanted to, or an actual Stream Deck. It's going to send messages to LV1 and switch the scene. So super powerful. It has been very reliable and yeah, super stable. So what you'll see here, I've got an actual Stream Deck controller next to the host computer, and this has a button on it. One button says tuning off. So if I hit that, you'll see tuning is now turned off. If I hit chromatic, like that, now we're in chromatic mode. And I did this is right next to our host computer. This is actually, we're tapped into the Stream Deck network through Companion satellite. So this is allowing us to basically just have this Stream Deck. It's not our main Stream Deck, but it's an extra one we've got. We can have it plugged into whatever computer we want and just basically tap into our main Companion file, or our main Companion sort of automation network that we've got running. So we've got backup control over the keys of the song, just in case something goes wrong with the automation. You know, if the person on sound hears something that's off, and maybe the tuning's off, they can manually turn off the tuning just by hitting the Stream Deck buttons. But for the most part, you know, the automation is going to do its thing, and we're not going to have to worry about it. So the key for that is now we have to connect this here. We basically have to remotely trigger these Companion buttons from our ProPresenter computer. And the key to doing that comes with the Rosstalk protocol. So under and within our Companion page here, if we go to Settings, scroll down, and you're going to see Rosstalk. So we want Rosstalk to be enabled. We want to have the listener turned on. Take note of what port number that is, 7788. And we're also going to need to know the IP address of this computer, which in this case, we'll see it right up here. It's 192.168.2.127. We're going to need that as well as the port number. And now we're going to head over to ProPresenter. You see we've got, as I showed you earlier, we've got our different slides, and these are controlling the LV1. So the key to doing this is we essentially need to set this up to send commands to the Rosstalk listener on the Companion setup. So under ProPresenter, Settings, Devices, you want to hit plus and hit Rosstalk. The Rosstalk will pop up here. I'm going to turn it off now just so I can show you the settings, but you could technically label it LV1 control or Companion control. You could label it whatever you want. Turn the auto reconnect on. That's pretty important. Set it to, you want network, TCP, and you want it to be a controller because we are controlling something else through Rosstalk. So we want connect to any and put your address in. So this here is going to be the IP address of whatever computer is running Companion. So as I showed you earlier, this is our IP address. Put your port in and then turn it on. And that should be good to go. You shouldn't have to touch that again. And then what you got to do is set up some macros. So you see I've got a bunch of macros here corresponding with the keys. And under every macro, you'll see I'm adding a communication queue to Rosstalk. And under command, it's a custom control. And this number is what matters. So this number corresponds with the button that you're trying to press on the Stream Deck. So you're going to see it's 4, well, actually let's start at the beginning. So A flat, yeah, we were there. A flat is 4-2. So let's go back over to the Companion computer. Let's go to our buttons. Page 4, button 2. That's, so technically up is button 1, so this here is button 2. So doesn't really matter, like we've already set what this button does, but now we're just remotely referencing and triggering this button. So this is, right, that number isn't actually accurate here. You're going to have to mess around with this. Depending on your Stream Deck layout, the referencing numbers might change a little bit. The first is always going to be your page number. So this should be 4.2, I believe. Yeah, 4.2. And then the next one will be 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6. That takes a little bit of playing around to get it to work, but once you've got it set up, it should work every time. So each of these macros then controls LV1. You'll see in LV1, things are changing. That's good. So then all you got to do is drag whatever key. So this first song, Only a Holy God, you're going to see here, I've got the D macro loaded up. So when I hit the first slide, switch to the D. Second song is in the key of C, switches to C. What's another song we got in here? Man of Sorrows. What do we got? Chromatic. Yeah, I did chromatic because they tried to do a key change for this song and I didn't want to get that messed up. I could have actually put a second macro where the key change actually took place, but I chose not to do that. So you see there's a lot of applications that this can be used. You could use this to control other things within LV1. I mean, even this whole principle with Rosstalk works great for controlling lighting through Companion. So that's my next thing. I'm going to be setting up our lighting board to be able to kind of receive messages, MIDI commands from Companion, so that I can, have different cues here, triggering different lighting looks on our stage. So that's a nice way of using Rosstalk. But this whole communication from ProPresenter to LV1 is pretty powerful. There's other applications other than auto-tune you could use it for. You could use it for, controlling reverb levels if you want to have your reverb duck down during speaking moments during the service. You could kind of have some macros here that control different scenes with different reverb levels. You could do that. If you're kind of a one-man band in terms of your production and you want to automate even specific channel changes, you could do that. For us, we're not there. We have a dedicated person mixing. We just want to have their job as simple as possible, and we don't want to have any distractions with the auto-tune. Our purpose is to have it help make things more consistent and less distracting in the live stream and in the sanctuary as well. So for us, it serves a great purpose, just simplifying the process with that, meaning we don't have to think about it too often. We only really think about it if it goes wrong and something sounds off, and then we'll just turn it off with Stream Deck. So hope that's helpful, and let me know in the comments if there's any questions or things that aren't working for you. All right, take care.